So, to really understand how it is that you color correct an image, how you fix the contrast, you've got to be able to judge what is contrast. When does your image look flat? When does it have a color cast? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the very, very beginning. Like, what is color? How it's made up of red, green, and blue light, how they intersect in Photoshop, what those number values mean from 0 to 255. And then once we understand that, we'll be better able to understand color cast, and then we'll understand how to remove them, which I'm going to show you in this video. 3 great ways to quickly remove a color cast from an image. And then I'm going to show you how to do some special effect toning in Adobe Camera Raw. In addition to that, right away, we're going to talk about relative value because that relationship of the illusion of good or bad contrast is important to recognize in your images so you can take advantage of that technique. So again, this is going to be the front end is a bit theoretical in its lecture, and then it's going to be really practical how-to components. I've used Photoshop 2020 and Photoshop 2023 in demonstrating these techniques. And again, because a lot of this stuff hasn't changed for over a decade, don't worry about that version. These are all still the same exact tools that have been in Photoshop for over 20 years. Enjoy. We know that light and shadow are what defines form, but in a color to grayscale conversion process, color really dictates how that grayscale conversion happens. Let's take a look at these 3 light circles, remembering that red, green, blue are what makes white light. So if I were to select the red layer and move this up, select the blue layer, move it over. So these are perfectly 255 in their individual color channels. Notice how the red layer is 255.00, the green is 0.255.0, and the blue is 0.0255. Because 255 in all 3 color channels means pure white. 255 in one color channel while the others are all 0 means you have a pure luminosity value of that one color. That's why if you were to put a red, green, blue filter over 3 flashlights and overlap them, where they overlap would make the secondary colors. Noticing that red and green make yellow, green and blue make cyan, and red and blue make magenta, and where all 3 overlap, you have pure white. Notice it's 255 in every single color channel. But here's what's interesting. I'll add a hue and saturation adjustment later and just desaturate it. Now granted, this typically is not going to happen in the real world because you rarely have a perfect isolation of 100% luminosity in only one color channel. But it kind of shows you the problem, right? All the colors converted to the same shade of gray. And this would happen with a rose. The red leaves and the green leaves would convert to pretty much the same shade of gray. So let's talk about relative value. So you can do this experiment yourself. What I'll do is I'll start with a normal white document. I will click on my gradient tool, make sure it's on linear gradient, make sure my default colors are black to white, and I'll hold down the shift key so I'll only draw a straight line, a perfect straight line, and I'll stop just a little bit from the edge. So now I have a nice gradient. What I'll do is I'll add a blank layer on top. I'll come over and choose the marquee tool. And again, if you're being quick, the shortcut is the letter M. Hit the letter M, and then I'm going to draw by holding down the shift key so that it keeps it a perfect square, make a perfect square, and I'm going to hit shift delete to open up the fill dialog box. I'm going to fill it with 50% gray, and then I'm going to hit command or control J to jump that to its own layer as well. I'll hit V for the move tool. Now watch as I click with the move tool, holding the shift key so it drags in a perfectly straight line. Watch how the value of the gray appears to change. I mean, we know it's the identical 50% gray, 128 in all the color channels. But notice the further I get to the white area, our eyes lie to us. The same 50% gray square over the white area looks visually darker, and the light square, which we know isn't a light square, the identical color value, looks lighter. Look in the info palette real quick, pull it out so I can see what's going on. See, that's still 128. This is still 255. This gray square is still 128. And over here we have 0. And notice as I come across how the RGB values systematically change at a 1 pixel value as I drag across, right? All the way to 255. This is relative value. I'm sure you've seen this floating around the internet. Select the lasso tool, which is over here, and I want the polygonal lasso tool, which makes straight edge selections. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this B by clicking once, dragging my straight line, clicking on the corner, clicking on that corner, clicking on this corner, and clicking on this corner. I'm going to hit Command or Control J to jump just that to its own layer. I can see this by just turning off the eyeball underneath. So what I'm going to do is hit the move tool, and I can either go all the way over here and select the move tool, or I can just hit the letter V. I'm going to grab that jumped up B, and notice as I overlay these, notice they're the same color, right? Let's look at those in the info palette. So this is 119, 120, and this is 119. Now I'm going to pull this back. In the shadow area, it looks like a light square, but when it's being hit by light, that same 50% square looks dark. That's relative value. Hey, check out what I can do with my eyebrows. This short video is going to cover some of the better ways to adjust the color contrast in this video is going to cover some of the good, better, best ways to remove color cast and improve the contrast of your images using the levels adjustment layer. This image has a color cast problem and a contrast problem. Contrast in photography is the visual ratio of different tones in an image that's measured from pure white to pure black with a full range of grays in between. It's this difference in tones that creates the textures, highlights, shadows, and clarity in a photograph. If a photograph does not have normal contrast, it typically falls on the high contrast side or the low contrast side. High contrast means there's an abundance of dark and light tones with very few midtones. A low contrast image is typically called a flat image, and that usually has a lot of midtones, but it doesn't have any blacks or whites, and most commonly it doesn't have both. That's the case with this image. I'm going to add a levels adjustment, which is going to show me the histogram. And yes, that confirmed my suspicion. There are no black tones, there are no white tones. Now, if you need to do a quick contrast fix, all you have to do is just drag the black slider or the white slider, or in this case, both, to the base of the mountain. It's going to quickly fix your contrast issue. But since we didn't correct the color cast issue to begin with, now we can really see that kind of green color cast. So I hit Command Z twice, Control Z for Windows, to undo those two things. So I'm going to click on this gray point eyedropper and click on a light or light gray tone that should be there in the image, because that's where you're going to find your color cast the easiest. There we go. And we kind of see that that did fix it. Second option. If you want to be very specific, you can hold down the Alt or Option key while you click on this black slider. And as you drag it to the base of the mountain, all right, the base of the mountain is showing me that the blue and cyan are starting to go black. But you want pure black. You want all three color channels to be pure black. So look how far into the mountain I've got to drag it. I'm just now starting to get pure black underneath the shoe and around the shoe laces. There's a reason for this, and I'll tell you that in a minute. But I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key while I drag in the white pretty much here. Now, if this were a print, I would want to lower my output to maybe 247 or 252 for the output area over there in the levels adjustment. And that would make sure I didn't have paper white showing in a print. But since this is online, I'm okay with the extra drama. So now we've removed the color cast and we've adjusted the contrast. Now, whenever you reset the black and white points, the midtones auto-calibrate in between. So you need to drag the midtone slider to taste. Do you want this to be a little bit of a lighter image like the original one? Or do you want to be a little bit more darker, moodier image? You kind of set the mood with this midtone slider. So that's how you would fix it pretty quickly. I'm going to turn this off. Do you see the green cast now and how it looks flat as it compared to this fix? Now let me show you something else. I'm going to throw that away. I'm going to do it again. Levels adjustment. Gray point, fix the color cast. Now here's the thing. The reason that it didn't give us pure black at the base of the mountain, I had to come inside the mountain, is because each individual color channel is at a different point. You see how the histogram shifts? So let me show you a more specific way to adjust this. I'm going to add a levels adjustment layer, gray point eyedropper, click on the light or light gray tones that should be in the image because that's where the color cast is going to be revealed. That's going to remove the color cast. Now, instead of dragging to the base of the mountain here, I'm going to actually go in per color channel and do it, because that's the most accurate. But sometimes speed and efficiency, depending on your need, doesn't warrant this much extra work. Notice how the midtone slider always recalibrates to be exactly centered between the white and black point. All right, so now I have per color channel. Make sure you go back up and reselect RGB. See how it stretched out the entire histogram all the way across? So now I've corrected per color channel by going into each one and dragging the black and white points to the base of their individual histogram mountains. And this is a nice effect. Remember, you still always need to reset your midtone if you want that like brighter look or a moodier look. Now let me show you the best way. Wait, holy smokes, Batman. You mean it gets better? Wow, this is awesome. I'm going to undo that just by deleting it. And again, green cast, even though it's very subtle, You can now see it pretty easily. I wanted to just pause the video for a second because I know sometimes it's a little hard to see that color cast until you start training your eyes to see it. So when I say this has a slight green color cast, here's a way you can prove it to yourself. If you hit Command or Control J to duplicate the layer, go up to Filter, down to Blur, down to Average, first one. It's going to average all the colors and tones in that area. So then you can go to Window and toggle on the info panel and hover out here. Look at the RGB numbers right here. Typically, the largest number is going to be where you have the strongest color cast. So here, obviously, green is the largest number, but notice blue is right beside it. So it's really not a pure green. It's more like a greenish cyan or something like that. So another way you can show it to yourself, turn that off. If you double click on your foreground background swatches, and remember you can pick your color in here however you like, but if you hover outside, you can select the color from your image. So I'm going to select the color from my image and look at that new. It's really a very desaturated color. But remember, it's averaged everything. So if this were 50% white and 50% black, it would come out as a 50% gray image if it were perfectly averaged. So to see the real color tint, wherever this little circle lands, which is typically going to be on the more desaturated side, just pull it straight over to the middle and click. I'm just doing this visually. Click OK. That's going to fill the foreground swatch with the color, and then you can hit Shift Delete to bring up the fill dialog box and toggle on the contents of foreground color and fill it. Do you see how that looks like a real strong green? The green is not this intense in the image, but that is the greenish tint I was seeing. And now if you activate the info panel again, you can see the green tint actually went down by numbers, but the ratio shifted. So now green is more disproportionately more green than like greenish cyan. Anyway, that's just a quick way to double test your eyes in case you're thinking you see a color cast, but you're not sure. Go back to levels, remove my color cast. Always remove your color cast first. Color cast is gone. Now, instead of going to each individual color channel for that very specific adjustment, you can do it very quickly with the black and white eyedroppers because it automatically goes into each individual color channel to fix it. So if I click on the black point, I want to sample where I think it should be black, but I'm only at what? 17-18% of this image. So I'll hit Command or Control 1 to zoom into 100%. So I have a good sample choice. So I definitely want this where there's no detail or information. This is a perfect black point set. And then I need a white point to set. So I'll click on the white point eyedropper and I'll choose something over here, one of these things that I want to shift all the way to white. And that stretched it out. I can click again if I want something better. And then I'll hit Command or Control 0 to zoom back out and look at it. So now I have green hues, no color cast, and it's happened across all the color channels. So now I'm going to adjust my midtones to taste. Now this is what I would call just a starting point now. Now we fixed the color cast, we fixed the contrast issue. Now we need to figure out what it is that we want to do to make this an exciting image. For me, I would hit Command Option Shift letter E. That's Control Alt Shift letter E for Windows users. It's going to compress all your layers underneath from 2 layers to 2000 layers to the very top. Okay, so now let's go up to Filter, go down to Camera Raw Filter. So for me, I think I want to give this more of a blue tone. I know it's weird. We just spent all that time figuring out how to perfectly color correct an image, which you need to know how to do that so you can make the image what you want it to be. For me, I want this to have more of a blue tone. So I'm going to toggle on the basic panel and I'm just going to pull the blue temperature slider over pretty heavy. I'm going to pull up the clarity, not too much because I don't want to bring out too many white pebbles. The dehaze is going to give me some contrast. Now, if I go a little crazy, I can pull down the saturation just a touch, but pull up the vibrance just a touch. Now, blown out my highlights, right? So we know how to recover those pretty easily. There we go. What else do I want to do? Do I like that contrast? Do I want to make it a little more, a little less? I think somewhere in that range, I'd probably go ahead and go down to the effects panel and just throw on a vignette, kind of the way photojournalists handle it. And I would click OK. And that's going to take me back to Photoshop with that filter applied. Here's where we started. It's flat. If I hit Command L to bring up the levels dialog box, as we've already talked about, there are no black tones, no pure black and no black tones, no pure white and no real light tones. So we've fix that, and we fix that color cast to make this neutral with appropriate contrast. But now you have to kind of decide based on the flavor of the image you want to make for your vision. For me, I wanted to make this kind of a blue, cool, more dramatic look, which is why I went for this more moody image. But again, you have that total control. This is the one I would like you to make to submit. This is awesome. Hey, if you like this video and it helped, you can help me smack it, whack it, and crack-a-lack it. Take care. I like subscribers.
That's awesome! Whoa! Yes! Oh my god, I did! This is...
Hey, you stayed to the end. You know what that means? You're awesome. I'm talking about you. Now get out of here.